back possibly several centuries. But in the 19th century, it becomes articulated through basically theories of white supremacy, in which the rest of the inhabitants of the earth and indigenous people, either they don't exist, or they don't take good care of their land, or they're unproductive and lazy and not modern and not civilized. So this is part of the long tradition of civilization, the mission of civilizing the world. But on top of that, Zionists themselves, there's a long line of Zionist ideologues, including the founder Herzl, who wanted to justify the colonization of Palestine by European Jews or Zionists. And they would say that this is a land without a people, for a people without a land. And when many of them went to Palestine, we're talking before the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, so late 19th, early 20th century, they found this land not only inhabited by people, Robinson refers to them dismissively as several hundred thousand. They found a land with high, degrees of cultivation of fruits and vegetables and olive trees, and with an industry of soap making. And they found a land with agribusiness. They found a land with a tradition of textile industries and embroidery. They found a land with people who actually, many of them are professionals, lawyers, doctors, small scale industry, because at that time, it was only Europe that was industrialized. So this is a myth that has been repeated ad nauseum, unfortunately, by Zionist ideology. And it looks like Minister Robinson is repeating it in a very crude and unsophisticated way.
That was Hisham Safiuddin, an associate professor in the Department of History at UBC and Canada Research Chair with a specialization in the Middle East. He was speaking to CBC's On the Coast on Friday. Now, this morning, Selina Robinson issued a second apology, and it's read, "My recent comments have caused pain and distress within the Palestinian community, the Muslim community, and beyond. I am very sorry. I bear full responsibility. My words were inappropriate, wrong, and I now understand how they have contributed to Islamophobia and anti-Palestinian racism. During a time of crisis when many innocent people are being killed, including Palestinians and Jews with family in British Columbia, those in positions of power have a responsibility to bring people together. My comments, however, did the opposite and contributed to further division. I know that my comments have additionally caused pain, including among Indigenous communities, for perpetuating harmful narratives of colonialism. The experiences of First Nations people are not mine to manipulate. That was wrong, and I am deeply sorry. I'm grateful to each person who has expressed to me their feelings of pain, anger, sorrow, and outrage. All of it is valid. I also know that there will be those who are not willing to speak with me. I have broken the trust of many, including friends and allies. It is fair for them to not want to engage with me. I know I will have to earn back their trust. I am committed to learning from this significant mistake. To that end, I will be taking part in anti-Islamophobia training to more deeply understand the concerns that have been expressed to me. I'm committed to making amends, learning from the pain I've caused, and doing whatever I can to rebuild relationships. I am sorry, I will do better." End quote. And that is from Selina Robinson. Well, we want to hear from you today. Do you think that this means Selina Robinson needs to resign? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. On your cell phone, you can hit pound 690. You can also email bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now is Haroon Khan, who is a director with the Al Masjid Jamia Mosque and one of the signatories to a letter asking Premier David Eby to ask Selina Robinson to resign. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Why do you think Selina Robinson should resign?
Well, I think she actually listed it herself in her apology. Each and everything that she explained, downplaying the Palestinian people, that it's some crappy piece of land with very few people on it, a few 100,000, and that they had no constructive role prior to the colonization of what had become the State of Israel. It's a shameful thing to say, because it really reinforces this settler colonialism narrative that is false in every way. Right now we're dealing with a daily genocide. Every day, people are dying, men, women, children, so many babies, innocent people are dying each and every day. And her flippant attitude, her thing, well, they really shouldn't be there anyway. It goes a long way to dehumanize a whole people. And a call for her resignation, it's not just coming from us, from Muslims, it's coming from every avenue. Independent Jewish voices, folks from the indigenous communities, many student associations. Earlier in your broadcast, you alluded to a petition of 11,000 signatures demanding her resignation. Her apology in many ways sounds sincere, and I'm sure she is ready, willing, and able to learn, but not as a minister. Her conduct is unbecoming of a minister representing all British Columbians. It simply isn't. It's unacceptable for her to continue in that role, and we expect her resignation. And if she's really serious about learning, she can engage with us, and we're happy to do so. Ultimately, we have to work towards reconciliation. We need to work towards peace. We need to work towards understanding. But you also have to remember that words matter. Words do matter, and there are consequences for the words that you actually express. Now, I'm all for free speech. We have charter protected freedom of speech for anything and for everyone. But when you represent the people, and specifically the people of British Columbia, you and me, you're held to a higher standard.
So
and she certainly hasn't met that standard.
the apology to you seems sincere, as you said, but it's not enough for her to remain in her position.
Not by a long shot, no.
We are in a time of deep division with Palestinian and Jewish communities feeling the pain of what's been happening since October 7th. How does an event, comments like this from a minister, she said, contribute to that division?
Well, you look at the context in which the comments were made. She was amongst her kinfolk, her Jewish and Zionist friends, and they are commiserating over the situation in Israel, and they're pro-Israel, they're partisan, and we understand it. I understand that they are coming together as a community. But what are they doing, and what are they saying? They're essentially trying to justify the unjustifiable. The mask of Zionism is off. It's reflecting what it is, and what it is at its core is something that's wrong to almost every good-thinking individual of conscience and of ability to separate truth from falsehood. The fact of the matter is, Palestine has been under a brutal occupation for over 75 years. This hasn't started on October 7th. This has been going on for generations. And now people are being displaced. They're being lack the basics of water, medicine, food, humanitarian care. We have aid organizations trying to get aid in, and they're blocked. The people are being summarily executed. And this is happening each and every day. And when you have a person representing all British Columbians reinforcing this narrative that, oh, well, they're a backwards people that really don't deserve a land, how do you think we're going to feel? We're going to feel horrible. We're going to feel angry. And it's not just us. I must reinforce this. British Columbians from all walks of life, from all places, from all religions, from all backgrounds are backing this. So she really needs to heed the call to resign, and we will be happy to work with her and others like her to go and build bridges of understanding with one another. We're happy to do that because we have to.
I'll ask you in a moment, Harun, what that would look like. What kind of, she talks about education, what that would look like, what building bridges would look like. Let me just go to some callers here now as we ask what they think needs to happen next. Do you think that Selina Robinson needs to resign? There have been mounting calls since her comments last week. And she described the land, the area where Israel now is as a, quote, crappy piece of land. And on X, her first apology said, "I want to apologize for my disrespectful comments, referring to the origins of Israel on a, quote, crappy piece of land. I was referring to the fact that the land has limited natural resources." And that was the first apology from Selina Robinson on X, formerly known as Twitter, last week, and another one this morning. Let's go to calls now. Roman is up first, calling us from Port Alberni. Hi, Roman.
Hello, how are you doing? Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I,
What do you think, Roman?
I want to start by thanking your guest for summarizing what I believe very well the next steps that should take place, and especially engaging in the fact that this is a teachable moment for us all. And on that note, I want to segue into this very point here, seeing that your guest so eloquently said what I wanted to say. We need to be careful of our non-response as well as we're dealing with this. What I see lockstep with this is, and although the politician is not in power, Mr. Rustad, Honorable Rustad, made very dishonorable statements about getting rid of UNDRIP for the Indigenous people here, and that's right along the lines of what we're talking about here. UNDRIP is trying to establish a better vision and a better future for the Indigenous peoples of our very country we live in. And he's basically saying, well, let's just get rid of it. I talked to a few Indians and they don't like it, so we got to get it. It's not doing any good for anyone. You know what I mean? And there's what I'm getting to here is, well, we need to address Selina Robinson directly. We need to address all of these types of colonialist statements where we have control, we measure, and we mete out what we deem fair for you, and you will take it. Does that sound familiar?
And so what do you think needs to happen next with Selina Robinson?
She does need to resign. She does need to take her training. She does need to establish herself as someone who now has grown and understood what the consequences of her actions are. And if the voters being willing, she would put her hat back in the ring at a time after and only after she's met those expectations of herself and of the people she's directly offended.
Roman, thank you very much for the call. That's
okay,
Roman.
Thank you.
Take care. That's Roman in Port Alberni. And John is up next in Vancouver. Hi, John. Good afternoon.
Hi.
Tell me what you think should happen next in this. Does Selina Robinson need to resign?
She does, because if a minister of secondary education makes a crass, uneducated statement such as that, she needs to relinquish her post as much as in the United States, the professor of president of Harvard had to, and other universities, for making statements about genocide or Jewish genocide. There's no room for that, and she needs to step down.
John, thank you for that. We have emails coming in as well, and we'll get to them. bctoday@cbc.ca is where you can reach us. And so let's go back to our guest, Harun Khan, as we ask you as well on the open line what you think needs to happen next. I asked you earlier, or you mentioned earlier, that you're willing to build bridges. What would that look like? What would be the specifics of that?
Well, as your previous caller alluded, it's a teachable moment. Look at the ministry that she held, and I say this hopefully in the past tense, Minister of Post-Secondary and Higher Education. Let's try to achieve a higher education, not just for her, but for all British Columbians, for all Canadians, and for people worldwide. That the current situation is untenable in Israel, Palestine. It is something that the world has risen up. And if you look at federally, provincially, in our cities and in our towns, the vast majority of people not only support a ceasefire, but to completely end the war and the occupation, and have peacekeepers in, and essentially find a diplomatic solution. Now, how do we drill that down? That concept to a person who is making statements that are unacceptable for a public person to make, for somebody representing all British Columbians. How do we teach that moment? And that's by telling the truth. That's by achieving a sense of reconciliation, and by doing so, it's hearing from those directly affected by it. There are many Palestinian families here, and I've had students. I had a student from Langara University who attends our mosque in Vancouver, and he came to me, and he doesn't feel safe. He doesn't feel safe. A professor that was there that got terminated because of their views. People have lost their jobs speaking up for Palestinian people. All of these things are there, and they should be reinstated, by the way. But for her to really engage with our community, and for us to engage with her community, that's something that our mosque has done for generations. And it's that interfaith work, it's that cross-cultural work, the work that we can do as human beings. That's what will get us there. Now, I can't paint a rosy picture, because it's a very difficult situation, and people feel extreme feelings on both sides, because both sides have lost lives, loved ones, people that matter to them. But at the end of the day, you can't fight hate with hate. Violence will only beget destruction. And ultimately, we have to be the sane adults in the room to bring peace together. And that's really incumbent upon all of us. And I thank you for giving me the forum to speak, because at the end of the day, if we don't talk about these difficult issues, they will persist. And we can't sweep it under the rug. This is a real thing. It's an open gaping wound, and we have to heal it.
Certainly difficult issues. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Harun Khan is the director with the Al Masjid Al Jamia Mosque. And B'nai B'rith issued a statement as well, and this is on Twitter or X. Quote, Robinson appeared as a panelist at our event Tuesday evening, which was billed as an evening with Jewish officials. B'nai B'rith Canada was in no way responsible for the comments made by Minister Robinson, and they do not reflect the opinion of our organization. We have another call on the line here. We're going to go to that call in just a moment. It is now 12:25, 1:25 in the Mountain Time Zone. You're with BC Today. Well, after Minister Robinson's second apology this morning, Gloria Makarenko asked the political panelists on CBC's The Early Edition about those comments by Robinson. Here's what BC Green MLA Adam Olsen had to say.
Well, look, I just think that this is a member of our executive council. This is a member of our cabinet, and I think that the expectation of the BC NDP is that there are consequences when others around them in the political sphere, make statements and make these mistakes and et cetera. That's the expectation of the BC NDP.
What's your expectation for the BC Green? Adam, we don't have a lot of time here. Adam, can you get to what your expectation is
from this premier? Well, the expectation is that the premier holds this member accountable, and that there is consequences for these.
What kinds of consequences? What consequences, Adam?
Well, the premier has a responsibility to ensure that his cabinet is accountable for the words that they're taking. And look, the reality of it is that there was a time in this province, there was a time in this country where members, when they brought the government's name into disrepute, would have stepped down for much less than this.
That's Adam Olsen, and Green Party MLA, speaking on The Early Edition this morning. $12:28 now, 1:28 in the Mountain Time Zone. This is BC Today here on CBC. We have been asking you, does the Post-Secondary Education Minister Selina Robinson need to resign following her controversial comments last week? And she apologized this morning once again But as you've been hearing, calls were mounting, including from some mosques over the weekend. And we've been asking you this on the open line. Our numbers again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone. And for more on the political firestorm that has been triggered by this, we've reached Stuart Prest. He's a lecturer in political science at UBC. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Michelle. My pleasure.
What do you make of these growing calls for Selina Robinson to resign?
Well, I think it's really clear that this is a situation that is not going away for the government, and it seems like we're going to hear more from the premier on the issue this afternoon. And I think that's a reflection that the current situation is untenable. The comments that the minister made and the eventual apologies issued, they're really not rising to the moment to really address the severity of the issue. And this goes to the comments made regarding what the land was like in Palestine. It also goes to her role as the Minister for Post-Secondary Education and her deep involvement of the issue, calling for the dismissal of a faculty member. So she's really made some controversial moves throughout the last week, and I don't think this situation can persist for the government. They're going to want to find a way to resolve it definitively, and we're just not there yet.
Stuart, as you mentioned, the Premier is going to speak in about an hour from now. Premier David Eby was scheduled at a news conference this morning at 11:30, and that was moved to early this afternoon at 1:30. And we'll look to see what happens there. If you don't mind, Stuart, I'd like to hang on to you and have you just stand by as we continue this conversation. Stuart Prest is my guest right now. He's a lecturer in political science, and of course protests this morning as well at the NDP retreat in Surrey. They were ongoing this morning with protesters outside and again calling for Premier David Eby to act and to take more steps when it comes to Selina Robinson. We're going to take more of your calls. Angela is waiting in Vancouver. We have emails coming in as well. More with Stuart Prest coming up after the CBC News Update with Belle Puri.
Good afternoon. As you've been hearing, dozens of protesters gathered outside an NDP caucus retreat in Surrey this morning. They tried to deliver a petition they said had 11,000 signatures calling for the resignation of Advanced Education Minister Selina Robinson. Calls for Robinson's removal by pro-Palestinian groups and others have intensified over recent remarks she made, saying Israel was founded on a crappy piece of land. Meanwhile, BC Premier David Eby will make an unscheduled media availability at the Cabinet Office in Vancouver amid these mounting calls that Robinson be fired. This morning, Eby's office cancelled a previously scheduled housing announcement. 7 FIFA World Cup games will be held in Vancouver in 2026. All of the games are scheduled to be played at BC Place. City officials say the news is a huge win for tourism and local businesses. And King Charles III has been diagnosed with cancer, but Buckingham Palace has not revealed what type. The monarch has started to have scheduled treatments. Palace officials say the king will continue to undertake state business and official paperwork as usual. Now a look at the BC weather along the north coast, mainly sunny, a high of 3. In the Peace region, mainly cloudy and -8. For the central interior, mainly cloudy, a high of -3. In the southeast, periods of rain and 3. Southern interior, periods of rain mixed with wet snow and a high of 2. Along the south coast, that's Greater Victoria and Metro Vancouver, of course, mainly sunny and a high of 7. That's the CBC News from Vancouver.
Belle, thank you very much. That's Belle Puri in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. This is BC Today here on CBC Radio 1. I'm Michelle Eliot. Thank you very much for joining us. And Angela is up next on the question of whether Selina Robinson needs to step down. Hi, Angela.
Oh, hello, Michelle. How are you?
I'm fine. What do you think?
You know, this has been a lot to absorb. But, I mean, my personal position is that she absolutely needs to step down. I think she lacks the qualifications that are necessary for her position right now. She clearly has, a bias in terms of how she would be approaching any issue. And quite frankly, she's unable to lead in the way that British Columbians need her to lead. What I will add to that is that, from a personal standpoint, ever since the war broke out, I have been scurrying, trying to become more and more informed. Many Canadians, I have a rich history of, the Holocaust and the challenges of, Jewish Canadians. I am not very educated on the Palestinian issues other than what I've been hearing in the news lately. And I know the history goes back, not just hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. And I know the recent history, and I've been watching every documentary I can find about, the separation of the land and all of this. But the point is, we need somebody who knows and understands not only the history, but the implications of what they are saying and what they are doing. And she is just not giving us that, and she
Angela,
is hurting.
Thank you so much for the call.
Hurt.
Thank you for the call in. This is BC Today here on CBC. Thanks so much to our callers. And Stuart Prest, political science lecturer at UBC. So much emotion, and as people say, they have a very strong reaction to this, obviously. And what we heard from Selina Robinson's apology from the Premier as well is about the role of a leader in times like these, and whether. Basically saying she didn't fulfill that role. As she said in her statement, she contributed to that division. What do people need? What does the public need from a leader during difficult times?
Oh, well, that's a great question without an easy answer. I think it is, but in an issue such as this, there are just as you mentioned, incredibly strong feelings on an incredibly divisive issue. There's this sense of hurt and loss for those who empathize with the plight of the Palestinian peoples in West Bank and Gaza. There is likewise incredible empathy for the situation in Israel in the wake of the attacks of October 7th. And so quite often we see members of society who really empathize strongly with one side of that issue or another. And so one of the challenges for a leader is to create space within the larger political community, within the larger discourse for both of those deeply held positions, and so that everyone within the community feels welcome and able to communicate their positions, even while acknowledging the differences that exist. And that's a difficult thing to do, but it becomes all the more imperative as the divisions deepen, as positions become polarized, and that's clearly the case on this issue.
Let's take another call here. An email, by the way, from Lenora, who writes, thank you for starting this conversation with an academic point of view. There's so much hate and pain regarding the war. Lenora writes, forgive the minister her mistake, accept her willingness to learn. She is speaking with as much grace as she can. Lashing out and demanding her resignation just perpetuates the anger and pain. Every person is of equal value. Thank you, Lenora. Our email address again is bctoday@cbc.ca. And we had a call from John, but I think we've lost our connection with John. If you want to make one last comment, it's 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. Wondering what your thoughts are on calls for Selina Robinson to resign. And Stuart Prest, as I mentioned earlier, there was an 11:30 news conference with Premier David Eby that has been rescheduled, an unannounced or just announced news conference in 1 hour from now, 1:30. Not asking you to make any guesses, but what does that signal?
I think it signals that the government in general, and that Mr. Eby in particular, has realized that this issue is not going away, that this issue requires, just as we were discussing, greater leadership. And so that given that his minister has been unable to address the firestorm that she has created with her earlier comments, it falls to the Premier's office to do something more definitive to try to address the hurt that we've been hearing expressed throughout this throughout this show. And so I would expect that Mr. Eby is going to look for some more definitive action to allow the government to move beyond this issue and to show that they are listening, and to allow the government to move back to the issues it really wants to be discussing, which are things like housing announcements, the kind of thing that was canceled this morning. And until that happens, we're going to continue to see the business of government, what government wants to be discussing, interrupted.
Stuart, thank you very much. Let me just check and see if we have any more calls on this issue. Let's see, any more calls? And I think that is it. We did not get a reconnection with our caller, John, unfortunately. My apologies for that. And Stuart, thank you very much for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Stuart Prest is a lecturer at UBC in political science, and we will bring you that news conference by Premier David Eby coming up at 1:30 here on CBC. $12:40 now, 1:40 in the Mountain Time Zone. Well, dry January is over, and some of you may be celebrating that, perhaps with a drink, or maybe you're taking part in this month's campaign to go alcohol-free. It's called Dry February, and it's spearheaded by the Canadian Cancer Society. We're going to hear from them. And later on as well, we'll talk about the rise in so-called sober bars as we speak with the owner of a new alcohol-free beverage retailer and why the owner felt she had a market. We're asking you as well, if you're cutting back on alcohol, did you participate in Dry January, or are you participating in Dry February? And do you think attitudes toward alcohol are changing? Our numbers are 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Our email is bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining me now are Sienna Van Duzen, an advocacy manager for prevention with the Canadian Cancer Society, and Timothy Namey is director of the University of Victoria's Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research. Hello to both of you.
Hi, so glad to be here today.
Thank you for joining us. Sienna, people may have just finished with Dry January and perhaps hoping to move on. Why add Dry February?
Why not? We're advocating for Dry Feb this February to raise funds for the Canadian Cancer Society. It's also a really good opportunity for participants to reevaluate their relationship with alcohol. So, if you've already done Dry January and you're on a roll, you can roll right into February. But if you maybe missed January, then you're picking it up and joining us this month, hopefully.
And what is that? People may not be as aware of the connection between alcohol consumption and cancer. Sienna, I'll go to you first on that. What should they know?
Yeah, we do know that alcohol is classified as a group 1 carcinogen, and it's estimated to be one of the top 3 causes of cancer deaths worldwide. So the sobering news is that any type or amount of alcohol increases your cancer risk of at least 9 different cancers, and that includes head and neck, breast, colorectal, esophageal, liver, stomach, and pancreatic cancers. So to reduce our alcohol consumption over time reduces our cancer risk.
And Tim, to you, what have people just been as less aware, perhaps, between that connection between those various types of cancers and alcohol?
Yeah, I think I can't improve much on what Sienna said, but that's absolutely the case. As Sienna mentioned, alcohol has been classified as a group 1 carcinogen. That's in the same category as carcinogenic as benzene or tobacco smoke. I'm an itinerant from the U.S. by the U.S. government, anyways, and by WHO for about 40 years now. But it's interesting in Canada and in the U.S. for that matter, the awareness of the relationship between alcohol and cancer is not good. And the point is that risk starts with any consumption. So like the guidance, Canada's new guidance says, when it comes to cancer and for other things, that less is better in terms of health with respect to alcohol.
Right. And tell us more about those new guidelines that came out last year that basically said no amount of alcohol is really risk-free, and you should be limiting to no more than 2 drinks a week. What was behind those new guidelines?
Well, what's behind those new guidelines is hopefully very good science. We didn't want to kind of pull our punches scientifically, so it's true that the risks do start to go up above 2 drinks per week. We did not intentionally, we introduced risk zones in those guidance, so because we're actually more interested in talking to people who drink quite a bit, and we recognize that not everyone is going to be interested or able to cut down all the way to no risk. So we have sort of risk zones. But again, the idea is if you drink 5 drinks a day and you can cut down to 3, you're going to benefit tremendously. And if you drink less than that and you cut down, again, you'll benefit. So I think that's the main idea, is that less is more when it comes to health. And I think that's the key message from the guidance.
Sienna, have you been observing a change in perhaps our attitudes towards alcohol?
I have. I think the last year has, provided this opportunity. We know that over 40% of Canadians, for example, didn't and don't know today that alcohol has any relationship to cancer. And so with this increased awareness and with this knowledge, what I like about CCSA's guidance is that it does give you that continuum. It allows individuals to place themselves on it wherever really they're comfortable based on their own family history, their comfort with risk, and how they value and appreciate, the benefits and harms of alcohol. So it's been an interesting time to see people process this information, but we're making steps, hopefully, to healthier lives for all of us.
And is there that generational aspect to it? Because I've seen a lot of articles, and I hear just conversation around Gen Z and millennials not being as interested or looking for more of those non-alcoholic options.
When I speak to adults, I get a lot more defensiveness, denial, some curiosity, lots of questions. I think it's really hard because so many of us have had alcohol be so present in our lives for so long. It's the way we associate it with celebrating, connecting, socializing. So for us to imagine, doing these things in other ways in different spaces, that can be challenging. And I think that's important to acknowledge and reflect upon. With younger people, they don't necessarily have those habits or patterns built in. So when you say that alcohol is a carcinogen and it has this link with cancer, they're a little bit more open-minded, like, okay, yeah, that kind of makes sense. We know it's not necessarily good for you. And they seem to be a bit more flexible. Perhaps it's not tied to their identities or like I said, just their patterns as much. So it gives them a bit of an advantage. But I think we all have the ability to really think, what do these things look like? Can it be different? And I think it can.
We're going to hear from someone who actually sells non-alcohol or low-alcohol beverages in a few minutes. My guest, Sienna Van Dusen, Advocacy Manager for Prevention with the Canadian Cancer Society, Timothy Namey, Director of the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research at UVic. And we're asking you as well, did you take part in Dry January or perhaps this month in Dry February? And have you seen a change in our attitudes towards alcohol? Is your own relationship with alcohol changing? You can give us a call, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can hit pound 690 on your cell phone. And let us know as well if you have found it difficult to perhaps socialize or go to places without wanting to drink alcohol. Is there kind of a backlash that you face in doing so? And I'm going to ask my guest that, in fact, Timothy Namey, is that part of the barriers, perhaps, if someone is wanting to reduce their own intake, the sort of societal expectations?
Well, I think, alcohol is culturally iconic. There's no question about it. And alcohol consumption is supported by, a large series of industries. Actually, it's actually brings in government revenue. So socially, yeah, there's lots of entrenched things. One thing I wanted to mention, Michelle, is that with the guidance, we weren't just talking to Canadian citizens. We were also talking to the government. And one of the things is, if people do want to think about their drinking and are interested in cutting back, there's no information on the labels about how many standard drinks there are per container of alcohol, or what the serving size is, or how many calories there are, or the fact that, any health information about, fetal alcohol syndrome or cancers. So that's another big part. And I think the resistance of that kind of change and around labeling is emblematic of some of the cultural and social, opposition to changing. So I would actually interject. I think Canadians have been more open-minded and receptive to what was sort of put forth in the guidance than has been the provincial and federal government.
Let's take a call here, and Rob is joining us from Vancouver. Hi, Rob.
Hi, how's it going?
I am fine. Thanks so much. What do you make of dry January or dry February?
I got a new term. I've got dry 365.
Uh-huh.
Dry 365. Yeah, I never started drinking. Never liked the taste. Didn't like how I saw friends and some family behave when they drank, and became part of like a music subculture called straight edge for a while. And I think thanks to that, I learned how to have a lot of fun, be uninhibited.
What was straight edge? What's straight edge?
It's just an offshoot of punk that started in New York by some real punks, didn't have a lot of money, and they witnessed their friends getting really messed up on drugs and alcohol. And they just decided that they were going to, abstain, and kind of started what became like a subculture that's gone, international since the late 80s. But anyway, I'm not part of that anymore. But I just wanted to say that it's so great being a non-drinker. I do think, and now not everyone can do this. I'm a bit of an extrovert, but I do believe there is like a psychological barrier to be able to be uninhibited or relaxed or social. And I know that's a big reason a lot of people drink. And I think if you can try to push through that psychological barrier, then you'll find you can have way more fun than when you have a substance aiding you. And the benefits are you save a lot of money. You never have to have a hangover. You don't have to spend so much money on cabs or Ubers. And I just think you can have a lot more fun doing it. I encourage everyone to try it. I know lots of people who've gone sober. They have had real problems with alcohol and drugs, and they absolutely don't regret it. They don't think anything's missing from their lives. So I think I just encourage more people to try it.
Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks for the call. And Jan is up next in Victoria. Hi, Jan.
Yes, I'm not really very much of a drinker, but I spent a lot of time in Italy and Spain, and I find that I think we here as Canadians drink differently and put more emphasis on drinking than the Spaniards and Italians do. They'll, have a small half a glass of wine with dinner, and it's almost on a daily basis.
Rather than kind of binge drinking.
Yeah, I think that we here and in North America drink far differently. And I don't see anything wrong with if you're going to have your 4 ounces of wine once or twice a week, as the Italians do and the Spaniards do.
Jan,
I don't understand. I think it's a mindset here. It's different here.
That's a great point. Thank you so much for the call, Jan. Yes, and let's go to Tim Namey on that. What the culture, the difference in cultures, and is it about that problematic that binge drinking that is problematic? How do you compare that to perhaps, having, as she was saying, just a glass of wine at dinner, a couple times a week?
Yeah. Well, in general, right, like with a lot of things, I don't want to use that old hackneyed phrase, the dose makes the poison. But of course, drinking, first of all, 80% of Canadian adults drink. So, and other than health, there are many reasons why people choose or choose not to drink alcohol. So I totally respect all of that kind of thing. And in addition to how much one drinks, the pattern of consumption is also important, and that is somewhat cultural. People who are sort of drinking to get drunk or to get buzzed versus people who are drinking, less, and both of them matter. So drinking less and also sort of not drinking rapidly in a short succession are important things. And I do think it's interesting because in Europe, in Southern Europe particularly, they have this sort of the perception is they have more of a moderate drinking pattern or style. But actually they do drink a lot. If you look across Europe, a higher, probably close to 10% of all their cancers are caused by alcohol, which is actually higher than North America, because in terms of total volume, they do consume quite a bit. But yeah, again, the pattern, the sort of the drinking to the point of impairment is the most harmful pattern of consumption for sure.
Okay, really appreciate both of you for joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And good luck to you, Sienna.
Thank you.
Sienna Van Dusen, Advocacy Manager for Prevention with the Canadian Cancer Society. Tim Namey is Director of the Canadian Institute for Substance Use Research. Well, yes, more on that shifting attitude. It may be what's behind this rise in so-called sober bars. Raquel Foran opened a store called Booze Free Bevies in Port Coquitlam with her husband. Hello there.
Hi.
And
Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. What made you want to open up a store and a space, actually, for drinking non-alcoholic or low-alcoholic drinks?
Well, we came across the idea first because we read an article about how it was a growing trend for people to drink less alcohol, and we saw an opportunity there. But it was an interesting opportunity for us because my husband's been someone who's never particularly enjoyed alcohol. He's just never liked the flavor of it, but he's experienced a tremendous amount of peer pressure over the course of his life to drink alcohol, which we've always found to be a little strange. And so, yeah, it was an interesting opportunity that we decided to jump into, and it's been wild. It's been a great experience so far.
And you've been open for a few weeks now, right?
We actually opened at the end of November. We actually had our official grand opening just this past Saturday. And for us, that was a real eye-opener to see real interest in this, because prior to that, we just kind of opened our doors and it's been people trickling in. And
what do you hear from people?
Sorry, what was that?
What do you hear from people? What are they telling you?
They're really thrilled to have a space like this open. So many people, whether it's they've quit drinking at all altogether, whether it's they can't drink, or they just want to cut back. They want, to be able to pace themselves. They're really, really excited about having some flavorful, interesting alternatives to alcohol. And they're really, really excited also to have a space where they can come and enjoy a cocktail, not in a bar environment. It's a very different environment here when you remove alcohol. So the enthusiasm has just been over the top for it.
Very interesting. Well, thank you so much for telling us about it.
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Raquel Foran is co-owner of Booze Free Bevies in Port Coquitlam. And you can let us know more about what you think on that. What do you think of dry January, dry February? You can give us a call. You can give us an email, rather. Send us an email, bctoday@cbc.ca.